Hello YouTube, this is Landon, Redhead Takes, and we're here for another NFL preview. This time we'll be going over the AFC South. Not my favorite division in the world, but one nonetheless that needs to be covered. I guess we'll see how this goes. The AFC South is a tricky division just because it's just have two of the worst teams in it, and it's just full of teams that always seem to underachieve. Like the Colts. We'll start out with the Colts. Key additions this offseason: Yannick Ngakoue, who should be good in the middle, along with DeForest Buckner. Matt Ryan. We'll see if he's really fallen off like it seems like he did last year with Atlanta. And Stephon Gilmore coming in on a 2-year deal. We'll see if he can bolster that defensive backfield. I think Ngakoue is a good pickup, honestly. Matt Ryan, I think he still has something left in the tank. I don't think it's fair to completely judge him on last season because who did he really have to throw to? I mean, sure, he had Ridley for the first couple games, but you know how that all ended. Now he's not around for a year. And Ngakoue wanted to just get out. Stephon Gilmore's coming back. We'll see how good he is. I mean, I think their defense should probably take a hit this year since they lost so many pieces. Not to mention they lost Matt Eberflus to the Bears, be their head coach. Boy, that could be a disaster for him, but we'll see. Then they lost Wentz. It's really a shame that Carson Wentz failed so poorly, and just if he hadn't gotten injured, we're going to look back on his career and say if he had not gotten injured, he would be much better. Lost Pascal and T.Y. Hilton and Mark Lewinsky on the offensive line. Xavier Rhodes, that's all I'll say. TJ Carey, you see, Rock Ya-Sin got traded to the Raiders. Kerry Willis, who was a burgeoning safety who retired for a godly purpose to find his voice and become a pastor, which I commend totally. Jack Doyle seemingly retired, so I guess they are going to need to find a new tight end somehow because that'll be a big loss for them. Although the Colts, I think, will still be above average to good at times. Probably again, I guess we'll have to wait and see if they finally make it to the promised land again. I think Matt Ryan will be able to do something with his team, honestly. Now that T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal are gone, maybe we'll see Michael Pittman finally take his spot as the true number one, even though he kind of was last year, but there was always just, they ran the ball a lot. Jonathan Taylor looks to repeat, or at least somewhat repeat what he did last year. Don't think he'll completely repeat it, but he should still be good. That offensive line is still one of the best in the league. The Colts, I think, by the end have a season record of 10-7 is reasonable. I think they should finish in first. Some might say that the Titans will finish in first, but we'll get into them as my next team to cover. But ultimately, Colts, hopefully they're not a big disappointment. I like Frank Reich as a coach, even though that front office is so dysfunctional. If the Ursays ever got rid of the Colts, they might be able to be in better hands, but until then, let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. Team that completely failed last year. Well, not completely. They made it to the playoffs as the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. I think that kind of set them up for failure. This year they picked up Robert Woods, who should be just as good as he was in LA. They re-signed Harold Landry on linebacker. He's their big piece on their defense. Austin Hooper, we'll see if he can regain his form that he had in Atlanta, since he was kind of underused in Cleveland because Cleveland wanted to focus on Njoku, even though he's injured all the time. And they brought back Ben Jones, should be good again at center. Now to the losses. They lost A.J. Brown, which will be huge for them. Questenberry and Saffold on the offensive line, so that might impact Derrick Henry a little bit. Sean Evans at safety, and Deontay Foreman at running back, who's pretty good as a backup running back. He used to be in fantasy a couple times, and he did pretty well for me. So unless Derrick Henry can stay healthy the whole year, we'll see. I think Derrick Henry will bounce back. I don't think bounce back is a proper word, since he was on his way to an all-time season last year until he got injured, seeing as how it took Jonathan Taylor to almost the end of the season to finally pass him, just to show what kind of rate he was going at. So they probably don't have any decent running backs in the back to fill in the gap if Derrick Henry were to get injured again. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. They drafted Treylon Burks as part of that big trade, trading away A.J. Brown. I gotta stress that trading A.J. Brown was probably the right decision, seeing as how they had to get something for him, but it's gonna be a loss for them. I mean, you can't lose someone like A.J. Brown and still be decent, even though their passing attack wasn't that great last year, because although Ryan Tannehill showed in his first season with Tennessee that he could be something, then they overpaid him, and now they're going to be suffering through that for a while. I think Ryan Tannehill is still a decent quarterback, just he has some accuracy issues, and he throws a lot of picks, fumbles the ball at times. His decision-making skills were should be held under the microscope after how that game ended in the playoffs last year. Really no reason they should have lost. Should have won that game. Honestly, should have won that game pretty handily. But, I mean, they let the Bengals hang around. So, I think the Titans should be decent again. I mean, we'll see how the losses on the offensive line and their wide receiver core affect them. I think their defense will still be pretty solid for the most part. But I think in the end, the Tennessee Titans should finish the season around probably 9-8. Maybe they'll go. I think they could go anywhere from 11-6 to 9-8, depending on how. Or depending on if Derrick Henry is able to bounce back. But they should be good. They should be right in the thick of it for first place in that division. Although I still think the Colts win out, but we'll see. It's so hard to predict, because Derrick Henry is such a game changer, and if he's on the field for a full 16, they probably win first place. Now let's go to the bottom of the division with two teams that are just, boy, they're a mess. Although they both made some moves. that should maybe help them get better, at least somewhat. Jags resetting the market by signing out those wide receivers, bringing in Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. I think Christian Kirk can do something. I mean, he's definitely overpaid for what he's shown so far in the league, but ultimately I think he's a decent deep threat. It'll be incumbent on Trevor Lawrence to do something. Zay Jones, I think, was probably really overpaid, and I don't think it's really... I guess he's a decent possession receiver, but not much. And having an Ingram is just... Can't hold on to the ball, for fuck's sake. It's just ridiculous. With a body like Evan Ingram and just his intangibles, you would think he would be able to do something, but he always seems to drop the ball. And yeah, he had Daniel Jones, but I think Daniel Jones could be poised for a return, a big year this year. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, Evan Ingram, I mean, it's only 1 year, $9 million, a lot. I don't think he sticks around with the Jags for more than a year. Brandon Scherff should be a good addition on that offensive line. That offensive line was not great, so he should be a good anchoring point on the left-hand side. Foye or Fotokasi at defensive tackle. I don't know much about him. Apparently, he got a lot of money. Foye Alcoon at linebacker. Again, don't know much about him. Got paid a lot of money, so he's a big addition. Got paid a lot of money, so a lot is expected. Quarterback Darius Williams. Again, don't know much about him. They re-signed Cam Robinson after using the franchise tag on him, so again, a lot of these additions I don't know much about, except Christian Kirk. It should be pretty decent, but it's anybody's guess how. I mean, this team has so many holes, so they had to do something, but this may come back as one of those off seasons down a couple of years that was just a big cluster for them. I do think Trevor Lawrence might take another step this year. I mean, he has some more weapons to use, although on that, they did lose DJ Chark, who was injured last year, so we don't know how he'll return with the Lions. Andrew Norwell, offensive line, and they lost their defensive captain, Miles Jack, to Pittsburgh, so I mean, that defense is really not great, although they did make some additions. As I was saying with Trevor Lawrence, I really like Trevor Lawrence. I want him to do well. He's such a great talent. It's unfortunate that when you're so good, you have to go to a bad team. You get drafted by a really bad team, so we'll see how it does. I like him to bounce back somewhat, at least reduce the number of interceptions a little bit and some fumbles. He's finally away from Urban Meyer, so that can only be good for him. And they did add Trayvon Walker at edge as the number 1 overall pick, and Devin Lloyd later in the draft after making a trade at linebacker. I like Devin Lloyd. He should do pretty good. Probably provide an anchor point in that defense. I see potential captaincy eventually, should he prove his worth in the NFL. Trayvon Walker, I think, not saying he's going to be a bust, but I think he's another one of those examples every year where you see a draft pick go from near end of the first round to second round pick, and he rises within the first couple weeks before the draft and goes like near the top or at the top, like Walker was at this case. And boy, I think the Jags are gonna regret not taking Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, he was right there. Hutchinson is a beast, and I think they're gonna come to regret it. But we'll have to wait and see. maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Hutchinson will be the bust and Travon Walker won't. But why you allowed Aiden Hutchinson to go home and stay in Michigan with Detroit, with the childhood team, and why you don't bring him down here? I don't know. The Jags probably going to have another down year, probably 5. I think maybe 5 or 6 wins may be doable for them. Again, I think this year they finally won't be the number 1 overall pick, but I've been wrong before, so I think they made some additions that may be beneficial for them, but it's going to be a rough year again for Jags fans. I mean, the owners want to spend money, but it's just had bad management at the top. And finally, we have the Houston Texans, who finally got rid of Deshaun Watson. I know recently they settled with a lot of those sexual assault charges against Deshaun Watson, so I don't know what that means for Deshaun Watson and the team, or and his former team, but yeah, they finally got rid of him, and they got a lot of draft picks for him. I think in the end the Texans will probably win this out, even just for, yeah, they got draft picks, but they got rid of a cancer. That's Deshaun Watson, and he didn't want to play for you anymore, so good to get something, or actually get a lot for him. Key additions this offseason were re-signing Brandon Cooks, which they had to do. They had to give him a lot of money for him to stay, and he was one of the few bright spots with them last year. Added Jerry Hughes, who's old in the tooth, but may provide some pass rush on that defensive line. Malik Collins should be decent. Jalen Reeves-Maven, don't know much about him, but he was one of their big money additions. They did lose, like I said, Deshaun Watson by trade. David Johnson left the team, so, and thus ending and putting a storybook ending on one of the worst trades in NFL history, giving away DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson, who at that point when he was traded had a couple down years, so really didn't make sense. And it still doesn't make sense why that trade went through. Lost Terrence Mitchell and then Justin Reed. This team has a lot of holes. I mean, they're not going to be good for a while, but they did make some good picks in the draft. Derek Stingley, cornerback, and Kenyon Green, offensive line. I mean, they had so many holes. They had many positions to pick, and they just picked the best players at the best position. So I think they'll be good, decent additions in the team. May take a little bit long to develop, but I think they'll be pretty good for them in the future. They still have a lot of holes to fill, so, and they won't probably be in playoff contention for another 2 to 3 years probably, but I think Davis Mills is the wild card in all this. I mean, rookie season last year, and at times he showed promise. He showed that he could be a quarterback. Now, he had a lot of mistakes at times, but with a team like this, it's really, I don't think it's entirely really on him. Developed some good chemistry with Brandon Cooks, so I'd like to see that progress and continue this season. I think he'll take another step into proving he could possibly be the long-term solution. Ultimately, I think Texans, regardless of what happens, will go after a quarterback in next year's draft, because next year is supposed to be a really good draft. And I like Davis Mills to maybe secure that, maybe continue to do well and get better. And then maybe next year, after the Texans draft a quarterback, they'll have a good battle in the offseason for number one for for the quarterback spot. I think in the end the Texans have somewhat of a decent future, or bright future, but it's just going to take a little bit to come to fruition. So there's my thoughts on the AFC South this year. I think for the Houston Texans, the final record in the end will be 3-14, 4-13. I think is reasonable. I think they should win a couple games at least. So final standings at the end of the year, I think Colts 11-6 or 10-7. Titans could be the same thing. I think they'll probably come right down to the end, and it'll come down to head-to-head for them. Jags 5-12, or maybe even 6-11. I'm not sure. Then Texans 3-14 or 4-13 are reasonable projections for them. I don't think the Jags or the Texans surprise in this division. I don't think that's possible. It'll be between the Colts and the Titans all year. Whoever wins the head-to-head probably takes the division. There we go. We have my thoughts on the AFC South this year. If you're just stopping through, give it a like, subscribe, comment. Your likes on my videos really help my other videos get noticed, so definitely give it a like if you like what I'm doing here. And as always, have a great day, and God bless.